There are phases in life when no one needs to hurt you because you're already exhausted with yourself. Every morning feels the same. Each day passes without leaving a trace. You start to wonder, is this really your life? And then, just when it feels like there's nothing left worth holding on to, something small appears. A friend checks in. A song moves you to tears. A moment when you quietly make yourself a cup of hot tea. These moments don't explain the pain, but they remind you, something is still gently holding you here. This video will help you realize, even in the darkness, you can still keep walking, one small step at a time, with a heart that's still warm. If this speaks to you, share this video with someone who might need it. Hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe to the Stoic App channel so that whenever you feel tired, we'll still be here, walking you back to yourself. 1. When life hits you out of nowhere. It wasn't part of your plan, but now it's part of your life. Have you ever had that moment? A phone call, a test result, an unexpected event that strikes when you're completely unprepared. It doesn't give notice. It doesn't ask if you're ready. All it takes is one moment, and everything shifts direction. Today, I'll tell you a story like that. A man, not special, not extraordinary, but who got hit hard by life, right when he thought he was finally okay. He had just gotten his life back on track. A new job after years of instability, a steady income, enough to live comfortably and save. He was even planning to take his son hiking that weekend, for the first time in months. Things weren't perfect, but peaceful. A quiet kind of peace, not loud, but enough to make him feel like he was living in the right direction. Then, on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, his phone buzzed. The test results came in. Stage 3, cancer. He didn't cry, at least not yet. He just sat down in a chair, eyes blank, staring at some point on the living room wall, and muttered, "I don't have time for this right now." It may sound irrational, but it was the truest reaction of someone desperately trying to hold on to the old order just as it collapsed, as if illness needed to be scheduled, as if catastrophe only had the right to arrive once you were ready to receive it. But life doesn't ask if you're ready. It just knocks and walks in. We spend our lives planning, trying to control everything, from work, money, even little things like dinner. But all of that effort, sometimes it only takes one event to strip away the illusion that we are in control. You might think that sounds terrifying, but Marcus Aurelius didn't think so. The emperor who faced war, plague, and betrayal still wrote, "You don't control the events, but you can control how you respond." That is Stoicism. Not about acting strong or being emotionless, but the ability to stay grounded inside, to observe the emotional storm passing by, and to choose to respond wisely, even when your heart is still trembling. Because sometimes, the very moment everything seems to collapse is the true beginning. In the space where certainty disappears, a new opportunity quietly opens. An opportunity to live more truthfully, more slowly, more deeply. An opportunity to ask yourself again, what is truly worth holding on to, and what is just habit you've been carrying to fill the emptiness? And if today, life has just struck you out of nowhere, start with one simple action. Place your hand on your chest. Take 3 deep breaths and repeat in your mind, "I'm still here." Sit down. Let the first waves of emotion rise without trying to chase them away. Observe them, name them, and let them pass. You don't need to understand it all right away. You don't need to look strong. Just be present, and that's enough. Because what happened today may not yet have meaning, but it will. Maybe not in a week or a month, but one day you'll look back and see the place you thought was the end was the place you began living most truthfully. Not because you chose what happened, but because you chose how to walk through it. 2. It's not the event, it's the expectation that hurts. Why me? Is not just a question, but the final echo of a shattered expectation. Have you ever asked yourself, why me? Why was I the one who got fired? Why did they leave? Why did I try so hard, only to get this result? That question sounds like a natural reaction, but in truth, it's a sign that something inside you has quietly collapsed, something you didn't even realize you had placed too much faith in, the belief that things would happen the way you expected. Today, I'll tell you a story, not a tragic one, but a sad story, one that leaves a lingering echo in you, like a lesson no one ever teaches through words. There was once a man who believed that as long as he lived kindly, things would eventually get better. He wasn't the most outstanding employee in the office, but he always showed up on time, never refused to help anyone, and always tried his best to do his part quietly. 6 years went by like that. No complaints, no demands, no calculations. Inside, he held a simple but deep belief. If I live well, I'll receive good in return. Then one early Monday morning, he received an email from HR. Just 3 cold words in the subject line: contract termination. No warning, no conversation, no real thank you, just a bland notification. We acknowledge your contributions. Your contract ends next week. He didn't get angry, didn't smash anything, didn't cry, but he sat for hours in front of the screen, unable to lift himself from the chair, not because he lost his job, but because something invisible had just broken, the belief that I should have been treated better than this. We often think we're in pain because of an event, but in truth, we hurt because it's different from what we believed. He wasn't in pain over salary or title. He was in pain because he believed that justice would always be present, that if you live kindly, you'll be rewarded, that the world should be fair. But life never promised those things. It's just that he, like us, had written a silent contract in his mind and felt betrayed when the world didn't sign it. William Shakespeare once wrote, "Expectation is the root of all heartache." His heart didn't break because of rejection, but because something he quietly trusted didn't come true. And that's what causes many people pain, not because they didn't call, but because we thought they should have. Not because we missed an opportunity, but because we believed we deserved it. The pain doesn't come from what's happening. It comes from the gap between reality and expectation. Epictetus once said, "It's not things themselves that upset us, but our judgments about them." And expectations are a form of judgment. Even if no one hears them, they silently shape how we feel. They're unspoken proposals, silent hopes for fairness in a world that doesn't run on personal fairness. So if you're feeling disappointed, hurt, or lost, try this. Write down all the things you're currently expecting, from your lover, your job, your family, even from yourself. Then look at each line and ask honestly, did anyone ever promise you these things? Or are they all just one-sided expectations? Expectation is a conversation where only you are speaking. And if the world stays silent and doesn't answer, maybe it's time you stopped too. Not to become numb, but to begin to grow. When you let go of expectation, You're not letting go of life. You're just refusing to keep playing the victim in a play the world never agreed to perform with you. 3. The need for reasons is a form of escape. Everything happens for a reason. It sounds like comfort, gentle, soothing, as if every tragedy has some logical destination, if only we wait patiently enough. But sometimes that phrase is nothing more than a thin curtain covering a truth we don't want to face. There are pains that have no reason at all. And what hurts is not just the loss, but the fact that we have to live with a question that may never have an answer. Today, I want to tell you a true story, not to make you cry, but to make you pause and think. In 2020, Matt Mauser, a father, a singer, a teacher, lost his wife in the helicopter crash that also killed Kobe Bryant. Christina was a basketball coach, his companion for 20 years, the woman he once said, "Just seeing her, I knew what peace felt like." After the accident, hundreds of messages flooded in. Some said, "God has a reason for everything." Some wrote, "She fulfilled her purpose." But Matt didn't respond. In his performance on America's Got Talent, he simply stood in front of the microphone, choked with emotion, and sang her favorite song. No explanation, no promise of meaning, just a man trying to keep living with a void no words could fill. That is stoicism, not numbness, but the courage to live with a question that has no answer. Stoicism doesn't ask you to believe every pain is a gift in disguise. It doesn't assign a beautiful message to your grief. Instead, it looks directly at the truth that some things happen not because you deserve them, and not because you did anything wrong. They just happen. And the only thing you truly control is how you respond. Seneca once said, "Sometimes no explanation is the most honest path to peace." And sometimes choosing silence is more powerful than any reason you try to invent. Because in truth, the need to find a reason is a survival reflex. When we can't control the event, we tell ourselves a story to hold on to the illusion that we still understand life. But the more you force a message onto everything, the more you delay the process of acceptance. You don't heal, you postpone the confrontation. If you're in pain today, stop asking, "Why me?" You might never find an answer that satisfies you. And truthfully, you don't need one. Instead, ask something else. How should I live now with what's left? In that question, you're no longer a victim but someone who's beginning to rebuild, not with explanations, but with small, quiet acts. With each decision to choose dignity even when no one sees it. With every step, even if no one's cheering you on. You don't need to understand everything to keep going. You just need one right thing to begin. And a little courage enough to live truthfully, even when there's no reason left to feel hopeful. If this story made you go silent for a while, let that silence remind you of something. You don't need all the answers to begin again. If you're looking for a space to reflect, to return to yourself, this is your place. Subscribe to Stoic App, where each video doesn't try to make you great, but gently reminds you to live truthfully and bravely from within. 4. Control is an illusion. Influence is real. The more you try to control, the more you lose your freedom. There was once a man who deeply loved a woman. They were no longer happy, both of them knew it. But when she said goodbye, he couldn't accept it. He texted her more, called more, promised to change, promised to be more understanding, more patient. He thought, if I try hard enough, if I hold on tight enough, everything will go back to the way it was. But the more he clung, the farther she drifted. The tighter he held on, the more broken he became. And in the end, he didn't just lose the woman he loved, he lost the peace within himself. Today, I want you to remember something important. You cannot control other people. You can't control what they say, the decisions they make, or the feelings they have for you. The only thing you can control is how you respond, how you behave, and how you choose to live when things no longer go your way. It may sound small, but when you look at the extraordinary people who have lived this way, you'll realize it can change your entire life. Christopher Reeve, who once played Superman on screen, was left paralyzed after a horseback accident. He couldn't breathe without a machine, couldn't hug his children, couldn't feed himself. But instead of collapsing, he chose the one thing he still had control over, his spirit. He became a human rights advocate, raised millions of dollars for medical research, and inspired millions not with physical strength, but with acceptance and resilience in the face of powerlessness. He couldn't control what had happened to his body, but he mastered his response, and from there created a greater impact than anything he had achieved as a movie icon. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Control is not about gripping tighter. It's about letting go at the right time. It's about keeping your mind steady even when the world outside is changing. If you're in a relationship that's draining you because you're constantly trying to guess what the other person wants, or chasing an outcome that never arrives, try writing it down on a sheet of paper. Draw 2 columns, one for the things you can actually control and one for the things you can't. And you'll be surprised to see most of what's causing your suffering lives in the second column. No one taught you this when you were young. That true freedom doesn't come from controlling everything, but from stopping the demand that the world revolve around you. Peace doesn't mean making everything go your way. It means not letting the things that don't control you. And then, in the moment you stop trying to control the world, you realize you feel so much lighter. 5. Impermanence makes everything meaningful. The most beautiful glass will still break. There's an Eastern legend about an old monk who lived in the mountains. One day, he poured tea into a beautiful crystal cup, the only item he carried throughout his journey of practice. A student asked, "Master, do you treasure this cup very much?" He smiled, quietly turned the cup in his hand, light passing through it like a small star, then said, "I love this cup, but I have already seen it broken." The student frowned. "But it hasn't broken yet." "Exactly because I know it will break," the monk replied. "Every time I drink tea, I cherish every sip, not because I fear losing it, but because I know that all beauty in this life is only passing through. We often think that for something to be valuable, it has to last forever. But Stoicism teaches us the opposite. Precisely because everything has an end, each moment of life becomes sacred. Precisely because no one knows when the last time will be, every time we see a loved one, every hug, every ordinary meal, is an unrepeatable gift. Epictetus once wrote, "When you kiss your child, remind yourself that it could be the last time." That's not a pessimistic message, but a reminder to love. To love, not with promises of forever, but with full presence in the moments we still have each other. If you've ever felt regret after an unexpected goodbye, you'll understand that true value doesn't lie in how long you held on, but in how present you were while it lasted. So today, choose something you truly treasure, a person, a habit, a familiar place, and take a few minutes to imagine if one day it disappeared. You don't have to force any emotion. Just observe and let your heart speak. You might cry, you might smile, but surely you'll start living differently, because everything in life, even love, youth, health, and sunlit mornings, is not meant to be possessed, but to be cherished and then released. Nothing lasts forever, but it's the very brevity that makes it eternal in your memory. If today you still have a chance to see someone you love, please see them fully. If you still have the chance to say something kind, please don't wait. Because everything you cherish, from a hug, a glance, to a quiet moment, is quietly changing. Precisely because nothing lasts, everything becomes sacred. And if this chapter made you pause for a moment to think, to feel, to slow down, share it with someone who also needs to be reminded. Life only becomes meaningful when we understand that nothing lasts forever. Hit like if you feel this message deserves to be shared. And if you want to keep walking this journey of living more deeply, courageously, and meaningfully each day, subscribe to Stoic App. We don't promise to teach you how to be great, only to remind you to live truthfully in every remaining moment. 6. Sometimes pain is not a punishment. It's a refining fire. It's not pain that weakens you. It's how you choose to face it. There are moments no one asks for, and no one is ever ready for. In 1981, John Walsh lived a normal life. A wife he loved, a 6-year-old son named Adam, and a steady job in the hotel industry. Until one day, in an instant, everything collapsed. Adam was abducted while shopping with his mother in a Florida department store. 2 weeks later, the boy's body was found. No one knew why. No one took responsibility. The police were helpless. And John, a father who once imagined he'd stay in a quiet job for life, was left with two choices: drown in hatred or rise from a pain no one should ever have to bear. He chose to rise. Not with speeches or emotional tweets. He created the television program America's Most Wanted, a platform that publicly identified the most dangerous criminals, helping capture over 1,200 fugitives over 25 years. It wasn't justice for his son alone, it was justice for thousands of other families. And he never stopped saying, "I didn't choose what happened, but I choose not to let it be meaningless." That is the essence of Stoicism, because as Seneca once wrote, "Difficulty strengthens the mind just as labor strengthens the body." Pain is not a punishment, it is a forge, a fire, and if you walk through it without collapsing, you will emerge stronger, calmer, and more connected to who you really are. Many people think that if life becomes difficult, it means they've taken the wrong path. But the truth is, sometimes the right path is disguised in losses no one could predict. Pain is not always a sign of failure. It can be an invitation to become the person fate believes you can be. If you're going through something right now that feels unbearable, don't rush to ask why it's happening to you, because there may never be an answer that eases your heart. Instead, ask a different question, not to find a reason, but to find direction. What can I learn from this? Sit down, be honest, and write down 3 things this pain is teaching you about life, about others, and most deeply, about yourself. Maybe you're not ready to forgive. Maybe each morning you still wrestle with a nameless void. But if you still choose to be kind, still choose not to turn bitter or abandon your values, then you are not simply surviving, you are forging your soul through fire, day by day, breath by breath. Because sometimes you are not rescued from the suffering, but if you are brave enough to keep walking with wounded feet, you'll realize this very pain is the fire not to destroy you, but to refine you into a version of yourself that nothing can break. 7. The doors that closed were never yours. Not every loss is a failure. Sometimes it's fate's quiet whisper, that door was never meant for you. Terry Crews once had a dream, to become a professional football star. He made it to the NFL, but not long after, his career fell apart. He was cut from the team, lost his job, and had no plan B. Terry worked as a security guard, a portrait artist, even cleaned houses just to pay the bills and support his family. There were nights he sat alone in the dark, not because he was hungry, but because the feeling of failure tightened around his mind. Did I just miss my one shot in life? But he didn't stop. He didn't try to go back to the NFL. He didn't drown in bitterness. He tried auditioning. Small roles, quiet parts, no lines. And then, step by step, from poverty to spotlight, Terry Crews became one of the most beloved actors, inspirational figures, and television hosts in America. When asked about that journey, he once said, "I thought my dream door had closed, but the truth is, it was never mine. I just hadn't found the right door yet." That is Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way. What seems to block your path might actually be the path. What hurts us often isn't the loss, it's the attachment to an expectation that no longer fits. We keep staring at the closed door, not realizing it was never really ours. When we try to hold on to something that's no longer right, we don't just slow our own steps, we blind ourselves to other opportunities that are quietly opening. If you've ever felt disappointed by a job that didn't work out, by someone who didn't choose you, or by a dream that didn't come true, write down 3 things, 3 closed doors in your life. Then next to each one, write, if that hadn't happened, where would you not have gone? What would you not have learned? Who would you not have become? You'll see, sometimes the world isn't against you, it's reshaping you, reshaping your path, reshaping your character, reshaping your growth. The right door won't require you to keep knocking without an answer. It will open when you're brave enough to walk away from the wrong one. And in that moment, you'll understand, every door that ever closed was never yours. They were only turns in the road, so you wouldn't miss your true destination. If you've ever stood in front of a closed door and still feel its weight today, share that story in the comments. And if you think this chapter might open a new perspective for someone, send it to them. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so this Stoic journey can continue to spread one step, one door at a time. Stoic App. 8. Let go, or be dragged. Some wounds don't come from what others did, but from what you still haven't let go. Today I'll tell you a story no one was entirely wrong, and no one truly bad. But one thing is certain, both of them carried things in their hearts they never said out loud. Ethan, a man in his 30s, grew up with a strict father. His dad had served in the military, was used to discipline, spoke little, and rarely showed emotion. In Ethan's eyes, his father never listened. When Ethan chose to study art instead of engineering as his father had hoped, they argued for months. Ethan left home, carrying with him a youth full of longing to be seen by his father, but never once found the courage to say it. Years later, when Ethan had found stability in his design career, He received news that his father had suffered a stroke. He returned not because things had been healed, but because deep down he knew he couldn't let it all end in silence. That night, when his father had regained consciousness, still weak but aware, Ethan held his hand and, for the first time in 20 years, spoke the words he'd kept locked away. "I used to be angry at you for not understanding me, but maybe I never really tried to understand you either." His father, a man of few words, only nodded. But in that single grip of his hand, Ethan knew. The thing that had hurt for so long had finally been set down. That is the essence of Stoicism. Epictetus once said, "You are not harmed by what others say, only by your judgment of it." Often, we aren't wounded by others, but by the conclusions we hold on to inside. And it's those very thoughts that bind us to the past, making every step toward the future feel heavy. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean erasing. It means accepting that the past happened and that you have the right to live a future no longer dragged down by what came before. If today there's a knot inside your heart with a parent or someone you once loved, try writing a letter. Write down everything you've never said. You don't need to send it. Just write to see clearly what you've been carrying all this time. And when you're ready, burn it like a ritual. Not to erase them, but to free yourself from the weight that's followed you for years. Because some things can only heal once you dare to let them go. Not because the other person changed, but because you chose to keep living as a free man, no longer dragged backward by words left unspoken. 9. Don't ask, "Why me?" Ask, "What now?" Meaning doesn't come from the answer. It comes from your next action. There was a man who went through a kind of pain that would leave many unable to stand, betrayed by the person he loved, losing both his home and his trust in himself. He didn't tell anyone for months, just worked, went home, and spent night after night awake in silence. Every morning, the same question played like a sorrowful tune, "Why me?" But no one answered. And in that silence, he realized something. No answer could undo what had happened, but maybe an action could make it all not meaningless. So he started writing, not to accuse anyone, but to understand himself. He wrote down every lesson he had learned from the collapse. He started a small group, a space where men who had been hurt could share their stories without judgment. No one called it something big, but for those who showed up, those quiet evenings of empathy pulled them back from the edge. He couldn't change the past, but he did something not everyone dares to do. He turned his pain into something that could lift others. That is the philosophy of Stoicism, most clearly echoed in the words of Viktor Frankl. Suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. Pain doesn't disappear on its own, but it can be transformed if you give it meaning. And meaning is not in the question, "Why?" It's in the question, "How will I live so this doesn't become meaningless?" Sit down and write that question at the top of a blank page. What now? You don't need a 5-year plan. Just one right action, one small thing in the right direction. Maybe it's helping someone who's gone through what you have. Maybe it's stepping outside instead of staying trapped in the past. Sometimes, one first step is all you need to begin finding your way again. You can't erase what happened, but you can keep writing through how you respond, what you choose, and how you treat others afterward. The memories won't vanish, but it's your actions that will decide whether the next chapter is still a story of a victim or of someone who builds. Because some kinds of pain don't need to be answered, They need to be lived through in a way that makes you proud to look back. 10. Life breaks you to open you. There are moments when life doesn't hurt you to punish you, but to open a door you never thought to look for. And sometimes that door is right where you just fell. Anthony Bourdain, a name that made the entire culinary world bow its head. But before becoming an icon, he lived in the shadow of addiction, loneliness, and aimlessness, working in low-end kitchens, falling asleep after shifts with a body soaked in grease, sauces, and nameless emptiness. No one knew him, no one expected anything from him, until he started writing not to be famous, but to survive. Kitchen Confidential. The book he wrote like a bare confession touched millions, not because it was glamorous, but because it was brutally honest. It wasn't the story of a man rising through success. It was the story of a man who hit rock bottom and began to live from the rawest part of himself. Bourdain once said, "Travel isn't always pretty. It isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it hurts. But that's okay. The journey changes you. Sometimes you don't need a smooth road. You need a hard fall, big enough to stop and finally listen to yourself." To Stoicism, that's a forge. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change. Loss is not the end. It is transformation, an invitation to shed what no longer fits and return to the inner core. Raw, unpolished, but real. Not the version built to please others, but your truest self when there's nothing left to hide behind." If you're going through a fall, someone left you, you lost a job you thought would last forever, or you simply no longer recognize the person in the mirror, pause. Not to complain, but to be honest. Ask yourself, what is this breaking trying to open in me? Then sit down and write in one go. No edits about the last time you truly broke. Let the words release what you've never dared to admit. How have you changed? How have you grown? And how much gentler have you become with yourself after everything? Some lessons cannot be learned while you're still standing tall. Only when everything collapses around you do you truly hear the voice within. You cannot escape the breaking, but you can choose to be reborn through it. Not into someone falsely strong, but into someone real, scarred, remembering, and carrying a gentleness only souls that have walked through fire can understand. Because that very fire, it doesn't destroy you. It refines you with every breath, every step, every choice to keep going. If this chapter touched you, share it with someone who needs it. Hit like to help this message spread. Leave a comment if you've ever broken and kept walking. And don't forget to subscribe to Stoic App, where every crack in you won't be rejected, but will become the place where light breaks through. 11. You are responsible for your response, not the outcome. You can't choose what life brings, but you can always choose how you move through it. And sometimes, true dignity isn't found in success, but in the way you continue to live with kindness, even when there's nothing left to hold on to. Rick Hoyt, a small name, but one that leaves a lasting mark on the hearts of those who've heard the story of him and his father. Rick was born with cerebral palsy. He couldn't walk, he couldn't speak. Doctors once said, he will never live a normal life. But his father, Dick Hoyt, refused to accept that fate. One day, Rick spelled his first sentence using a communication device. "Dad, I want to run." And from that moment on, their lives changed. Dick began pushing his son's wheelchair in marathons. They didn't win, they didn't take home big medals, but they finished together in more than 1,000 races, including Ironman. Not because he believed they would win, but because he believed the right thing to do was to never let his son feel left behind. Dick Hoyt couldn't control his son's illness. He couldn't control the pity in people's eyes, but he could control his response, and he chose to love, to act, and to live with responsibility, even when the outcome was never guaranteed. That is the essence of Stoicism. Epictetus once wrote, "Do not seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and you will find peace." Meaning, you don't need the world to go your way to have peace. You only need to follow your inner sense of dignity to not lose yourself, no matter the circumstances. If today you're facing something unfair, a failure, an outcome that didn't match your effort, pause and ask yourself, what is the right thing I can still do right now? Maybe it's forgiving someone, even if they never apologized. Maybe it's finishing what you promised yourself, even if no one sees it. Maybe it's staying calm in the face of insult, not out of fear, but because you choose not to respond with hate. You don't control your fate, but you do control your honor. Every choice you make when no one's watching, when no one claps, when there's no stage, becomes a silent brick in the foundation of your character. And in the end, that's the one thing no one can take from you, because dignity doesn't need to be proven, it only needs to be lived every day. 12. From the darkness, there is still love. No one promised you that life would be easy. No one said that the journey of being human would always be fair, always kind, or always end the way we hoped. But there is one thing that nearly never changes, and it is this. On the days that feel completely dark, there will still be quiet traces of love that appear. Not loud, not dazzling, but enough to carry you through one more day. Paul Kalanithi was a neurosurgeon. At 36, he was about to become a professor, holding both a philosophy degree and a scalpel, a man of such intellect and reason that people thought he could overcome anything. Until the day he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. People often think, when death comes close, we panic, despair, or fall into depression. But Paul chose differently. He didn't try to control the uncontrollable. He returned to the simplest things, love, gratitude, and true presence. He chose to have a child with his wife, knowing he might not live to raise her. When his daughter was born, Paul had only a few months left. But instead of sadness, he wrote her a letter, no sorrow, no demands, just a quiet blessing from a father preparing to say goodbye. You filled my last days with a joy beyond measure, a joy that doesn't hunger for more, but is simply thankful for what was. That is a kind of love without logic, without answers, but it is real. And it is also the kind of philosophy Stoicism has whispered through the centuries. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Dwell on the beauty of life, not the glamorous kind out there, but the beauty of a single moment, quiet presence, and kindness that asks for nothing in return." If today you're walking through a dark season, a loss, a nameless pain, or a silence you cannot explain, pause. Not to find answers, but to notice. The light hasn't gone. You've just been moving too fast to see it. Write down a moment, any moment when you felt truly loved, even while everything else was falling apart. Maybe it was a hug, a message, a friend who stayed without needing to speak. Those small things, they are candles, quietly burning through the longest night. You don't need to understand everything, but you can choose to live with worth even when no one's watching. Because sometimes The only thing left in the end is how you loved, how you lived, how gently you held yourself even on the days when there seemed to be nothing left to hold. You don't need to understand why everything is happening to you. You don't need to explain the pain or wait for someone to come and say, "You deserve to be happy." You just need to not abandon yourself. Living with virtue doesn't mean waiting until life gets easy to begin. It means that even in uncertainty, you still choose what's right. You still keep your compassion. You still stay gentle with others and with yourself. If today you are in your darkest days, remember, this is not the ending. This is the turning, the place where you learn to ignite a light from within. No need for anyone to witness it. No need for instant results. But you will know day by day that you are becoming someone unshakable. If this journey has touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share the video, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe to Stoic App, a place you can always return to, no matter what's happening out there. Because real change always begins within you.